In my hometown, just off the coast of Gulfport, is a series of barrier islands, and one of those is called Ship Island. And Ship Island is the home to Fort Massachusetts, and Fort Massachusetts was the home to the Louisiana Native Guards, the first officially sanctioned regiment of African American soldiers in the Civil War. I was really interested in this island because if you go out there, the park ranger won't mention anything about those black soldiers in the tour. And it's an element of that kind of historical amnesia, the way that some histories are buried and forgotten. There's an epigraph of this poem from Alan Tate's Ode to the Confederate Dead. Now that the salt of their blood stiffens the saltier oblivion of the sea. Elegy for the Native Guards. We leave Gulfport at noon, gulls overhead trailing the boat, streamers, noisy fanfare all the way to Ship Island. What we see first is the fort, its roof of grass, a lee, half reminder of the men who lived there, a weathered monument to some of the dead. Inside we follow the ranger, hurried though we are to get to the beach. He tells of graves lost in the Gulf, the island split in half when Hurricane Camille hit. Shows us casemates, cannons, the store that sells souvenirs, tokens of history long buried. The Daughters of the Confederacy have placed a plaque here at the fort's entrance, each Confederate soldier's name raised hard in bronze, no names carved for the Native Guards, 2nd Regiment, Union men, black phalanx. What is monument to their legacy? All the grave markers, all the crude headstones, water lost, now fish dart among their bones, and we listen for what the waves intone. Only the fort remains, near 40 feet high, round, unfinished, half open to the sky, the elements, wind, rain, God's deliberate eye. I'm going to finish up with 3 poems. Some of you might remember that just last year, the state of Alabama was in the news again for an election about whether or not they were actually going to remove segregationist language from their constitution. A few years ago, and you may not know or remember this, but they also voted whether or not to remove the anti-miscegenation clause from their constitution. And they did remove it. The state voted to remove it, but only by a small margin. Some 40% of the population still wanted to make it illegal for my parents to get married and for people like me to be born legally. This is Hustle, miscegenation. In 1965, my parents broke 2 laws of Mississippi. They went to Ohio to marry, returned to Mississippi. They crossed the river into Cincinnati, a city whose name begins with a sound like sin, the sound of wrong, miss in Mississippi. A year later, they moved to Canada, followed a route the same as slaves, the train slicing the white glaze of winter, leaving Mississippi. Faulkner's Joe Christmas was born in winter, like Jesus, given his name for the day he was left at the orphanage, his race unknown in Mississippi. My father was reading War and Peace when he gave me my name. I was born near Easter, 1966, in Mississippi. When I turned 33, my father said, "It's your Jesus year. You're the same age he was when he died." It was spring, the hills green in Mississippi. I know more than Joe Christmas did. Natasha is a Russian name, though I'm not. It means Christmas child, even in Mississippi. This is a pantoum incident. We tell the story every year, how we peered from the windows, shades drawn, though nothing really happened, the charred grass now green again. We peered from the windows, shades drawn, at the cross trussed like a Christmas tree, the charred grass still green, then we darkened our rooms, lit the hurricane lamps. At the cross, trussed like a Christmas tree, a few men gathered, white as angels in their gowns. We darkened our rooms and lit hurricane lamps, the wicks trembling in their fonts of oil. It seemed the angels had gathered, white men in their gowns. When they were done, they left quietly. No one came. The wicks trembled all night in their fonts of oil. By morning, the flames had all dimmed. When they were done, the men left quietly. No one came. Nothing really happened. By morning, all the flames had dimmed. We tell the story every year. And this last poem has an epigraph from E.O. Wilson that reads, "Homo sapiens is the only species to suffer psychological exile." South. I return to a stand of pines, bone-thin phalanx flanking the roadside, tangle of understory, a dialectic of dark and light and magnolias blossoming like afterthought, each flower a surrender, white flags draped among the branches. I returned to Land's End, the swath of coast clear-cut and buried in sand, mangrove, live oak, gulf weed raised and replaced by thin palms, palmettos, symbols of victory or defiance, over and over, marking this vanquished land. I returned to a field of cotton, hallowed ground as slave legend goes, each bowl holding the ghosts of generations, those who measured their days by the heft of sacks and links of rows, whose sweat flecked the cotton plants still sewn into our clothes. I returned to a country battlefield where colored troops fought and died, Port Hudson where their bodies swelled and blackened beneath the sun, unburied until Earth's green sheet pulled over them, unmarked by any headstones. Where the roads, buildings, and monuments are named to honor the Confederacy, where that old flag still hangs, I return to Mississippi, state that made a crime of me, mulatto, half-breed, native, in my native land, this place they'll bury me. Thank you.